a new unpublished academic paper that somehow made its way edition and into 3 separate articles on CoinDesk.com, right? So the paper is titled Cooperation Among an Anonymous Group Protected Bitcoin During Failures of Decentralization, which on the surface does seem pretty scary, doesn't it, right? The New York Times published 4,000 words about this under the title, How Trustless is Bitcoin Really? And here's what the academic paper did and how they did it, right? I'm gonna defud this, right? We know that Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous, right? It's a transparent ledger, all that good stuff. And because of that, people can go trawling around the Bitcoin blockchain to figure out things about the actors, the people who are doing stuff, right? These researchers applied a bunch of different techniques in tandem to find a more new information about the actors in Bitcoin. And one of the main techniques they used was described by Sergio Lerner in 2013, using what is called extranons. Basically, there's arbitrary data that gets put into a field by miners, which everyone was in the early days. And that can be used to profile users. And that's pretty cool. And the paper covered a period of time between Bitcoin's inception and then dollar parity, which was about 2 years. But the big aha gotcha that people are trying to get on here with Bitcoin is these 2 points. And they're not good points. The first one, Bitcoin is not as private as we thought. Okay, we never thought that. And the second thing, Bitcoin wouldn't have succeeded, weren't it, for the altruistic people in the early days propping up the blockchain, which we already know, right? This paper might be used as a means for FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, but in reality, it just shouldn't be. It's nothing more than an interesting exercise in looking at the dynamics of early Bitcoin. And like I've said many times in Slack and in Twitter DMs, 2010 Bitcoin, we don't talk to 2010 Bitcoin anymore, right? It's 2022. So anyway, that's my defudding. Do either of you want to jump in and get in there? Zach, go for it.
I want to jump in. I think that your last point is the most important point, the temporal element here, the snapshot in time element here. And I think what is happening in this New York Times piece specifically, maybe less so among the authors of this study, the extrapolation from then to now is a bit negligent. And I think some of that nuance around the state of this nothing burger network that wasn't guaranteed to have success before this asset was even worth anything, extrapolating that moment to this now moment in which Bitcoin is a major part of the cryptocurrency economy, that extrapolation to me feels the iffiest when we look at this stuff. There's some cool findings here going to a very granular level, but I think you're right. I think it's being misinterpreted as though it's a comment on what has become a much bigger thing, right? So looking at this little snapshot in time saying, oh, it wasn't as decentralized as we thought, and then applying that to the state of the current network feels a little bit argued in bad faith by some of the authors here. But again, it's worth checking out. If you can get your hands on some of the details in this report, it's worth exploring. Sandali, I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, the research is pretty interesting, right? What they did and the address linking work that they did, it's like nerd paradise. And you can really go down a rabbit hole and just imagine what you can do with large data sets, through this. And it's such an interesting story. It's the story of Bitcoin. So like a lot to unpack here that has nothing to do with kind of, as you said, what Bitcoin is today. It's what it was at the beginning. And I'm not entirely sure what the big surprise was about a small number of people and the centralization at the beginning. Like you said, George, that's how you picture the start of anything, right? Huge companies start out of basements. There had to be a basement moment for Bitcoin as well. And it was the first of its kind. It wasn't going to be instantly decentralized and picked up everywhere and mined everywhere. And as you said, I think what's more interesting to me was that it had to, rely on trust at some point. And whether, and this is an interesting question that the CoinDesk article points out, can participants be relied on to cooperate if a cryptocurrency stops appreciating? I think that's a more interesting question in this context, the present context we're at, where so many people are stakeholders of Bitcoin. So Zach, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that, or George.
It is interesting. I'll just say quickly, it is interesting looking at sort of like early, primordial soup of Bitcoin through an academic lens. Whatever conclusions are being made, whether those conclusions are sort of made in good faith or not, just being able to look at some of this data and apply this level of research to a very early nascent network before, again, that network effect kicked in and more people got on board, it is interesting to consider this in the historical context as something that will be studied by future generations. But George, you're the man on this one. What do you got?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of seeing the draft of this paper in early May. So I've had it for a while. I've seen it a bunch. And there are two things. I'm going to put my Maxi hat on. I'm going to protect my favorite asset. The first thing is when they talk about economic actors and trying to, hurt the Bitcoin blockchain and make money, that wasn't possible for the time period that is covered in this paper. It was from literally $0 to dollar parity. And like at the best, you could have made $1 million, which I guess great, but also not that crazy. And the other thing I want to say is that, yes, Satoshi did mine the Genesis block. So while it was quote unquote pre-mined, that is unmovable Coinbase. And then the next block was mined, I don't know, 6 days later, because Satoshi, the group of Satoshi was like, hey, everyone, come mine this thing. So it wasn't decentralized at first, but it was completely open and people could have started mining if they really wanted to, if they believed in it. So anyway, you had to trust somebody. I guess trust the code.